Hello, my name is Wiley Stevens. Welcome to the presentation. Today I'm going to be showing you a brief overview of how SeQent integrates with OPC and with FactoryTalk alarm and events. We're going to start off with OPC. Today I have Kepware installed on a virtual machine, as well as the first page alarm manager gateway for OPC. This is SeQent's software gateway in order to be able to connect to an OPC server, browse, select tags, and build logic or what we call events. Let me show you how we do that. The first thing we'll do is create a new device. That device is essentially our connection to an OPC server. We can populate an OPC server dropdown here by simply selecting the Kepware instance of an OPC server that I have installed on this machine. If there were other OPC servers, you would see those show up. Once we've created that base configuration, we can then go ahead and subscribe to some tags. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm simply going to say, no, I don't want to save the changes. So in the case of subscribing, we have a browse button, which allows us to reach into the OPC server and pull back a list of tags or items, and ultimately display those in almost an identical fashion to what you see in the OPC server itself. The idea is to lower the burden entry into that environment and ultimately provide a simple point and click interface in order for you to be able to select the tags that you're interested in monitoring. Once you've selected the tag that you're monitoring, it will populate that value in the OPC item. You don't have to copy and paste, memorize any of those things, and you simply give it a plain text name. The next step is to create the event itself. And you can see I've got a number here. We'll go ahead and take a look at the tank temperature manual high, for example. So the basic configuration is to choose a trigger item. This is the item we're looking to monitor, and then choose a test. We have a number of different tests. For example, maybe the conveyor is running or not, and we're wanting to know whether it's a 1 or a 0. In my specific case, I'm looking to monitor whether that tank temperature is greater than 79 degrees Fahrenheit. When that condition exists, that's what constitutes an alarm, and that's when I'm going to ultimately start sending some messages. To compare and contrast that against our first page alarm manager gateway for FactoryTalk View SE alarm and events, you can see it's a very different structure. This is an example of what we call one of our routing gateways, where the alarm already exists in a different system, in this case FactoryTalk View SE AE, whereas from an OPC perspective, we call this a data collection style gateway. Looking at the alarm and events style gateway, you'll immediately notice that there's almost no configuration in this application, and we're simply routing those alarms, as I mentioned, that are in the FactoryTalk environment. So ultimately, the user just needs to populate the FTView SEAE tab with the project path and a username and password, which gives us access to that information through our Rockwell Encompass partnership. Moving right along, I've got a second machine here set up with a couple of different applications, first page alarm manager and first page server. These are the applications that allow us to manage the life cycle of the alarm and create the destinations. I'm going to go ahead and show you first page here first. So in first page, we've got a number of, again, what we call devices. Those devices are the path out of first page. So the PC or server or virtual machine that first page is installed on can have a number of different ways of delivering a text message, with TCP/IP referencing a network connection being the most common. If I expand my devices and we take a look at a couple that I've got configured here, you can see the next level of configuration is what we call a provider. That provider is really choosing the protocol that we're going to be communicating with that endpoint, whoever we're delivering the message to. We've got a number of different protocols that are listed here. SeQent has a footprint all over the world in terms of our customer base, and so we've got protocols to support a global installation base. The most common in North America would be SMTP, meaning email or simple mail transfer protocol, and SNPP, simple network protocol, paging protocol, I should say, which is most common when you're sending a message to a carrier, and SeQent happens to use that protocol between some of our link applications as well. And then ultimately, when we create the destination, it's a very quick and easy process. I'm simply going to say no here. I don't want to save any of those changes. And I'll show you how fast we can create a new destination. Maybe I'm creating a Susan email here, or Susan cell phone, I guess this will be. We can actually tab down to the type field, and I'll push H for handset, but I'll show you the list here. This ultimately dictates the icon that you see in the tree view. And then finally, the network ID, which is probably the most important field that we're going to populate here, is the phone number. So maybe it's 555-123-4567. Then I can go ahead and Control S and save, and we've created a new destination, and we can actually go ahead and send a test message should that be an actual person that we've set up in the software. So first page again is where you create all of the destinations, like cell phones, like email addresses, like Motorola radios with a radio ID, and even our ability to send a text message to our Wi-Fi messenger software. In this case, I've got a generated ID of 68. But again, the management of that alarm is all done in first page Alarm Manager. And so this is where we again manage the life cycle of that alarm. And we do that through templatization. Our goal is to have the user create the smallest amount of configuration in order to maximize the messages and the alarms that they're ultimately looking to monitor. So I'm going to start with an escalation scheme here to show you what that looks like. And I've got a couple of examples. I've got one I've referenced as OPC and another I've referenced as FactoryTalk A&E. You could see in the FactoryTalk A&E case, I've only created one level. And ultimately, I'm going to send two messages with 300 seconds or 5 minutes in between. And you have full flexibility on how many escalation schemes you create total, or how many levels that you create within that escalation scheme. And then on the destinations tab, this is ultimately where we populate who's going to be receiving the messages with a simple box that shows me everyone that's available to be configured, all that configuration done in first page, and just those that have been configured on that level. So I can very quick and easily add or remove destinations should I see fit. If I move on to the OPC escalation scheme here, this is an example where we've got configuration configured level 2 after level 1, level 3 after level 2, and so forth. And in this case, just a single message per level with a very small amount of seconds in between as my delay. One other thing I'll point out here, our initial delay, this very easily allows us to avoid, in some cases, nuisance messages. If a system was to generate a message, within a few seconds and turn it off, or maybe it even goes on and off sub-second, we would all expect a alarm historian to record that. However, in the real world, that may not constitute you actually wanting to send a message to a technician, alerting them of a situation that they may or may not have to fix. And so the initial delay allows them to control when we actually start sending messages. You may say in your given environment, I want that message or that alarm to be on for a full 5 seconds before I actually go and notify someone of that condition. And this can be changed per level and also per escalation scheme. You really get a lot of flexibility in controlling when you deliver messages to people and who you ultimately deliver those to. And again, these are all templatized and apply to any of the data sources that SeQent has a gateway for. Moving up the configuration ladder here, you can see we've got a number of what we call agents. Each agent is representative of a gateway in my environment. I've got the gateway for OPC set up as my OPC agent. I also have a FactoryTalk alarm and events agent, which corresponds to that gateway that we looked at moments ago. In addition to templatizing the escalation schemes, we also templatize the message template, meaning the actual text that gets sent to that user, either to their radio or maybe processed as a text-to-speech message to a desk phone, for example. Looking at my alarm on, and again, I'm going to say no, I don't want to change the configuration I was looking at moments ago. Looking at my alarm on message template, you can see we can comprise this of both variables and literal text, meaning you can type text in this field to help generate an appropriate message to a given user, but you can also use the shift square bracket or the open curly brace to open up our variable interface. This allows us to replace those variables in real time when an alarm occurs, making those messages as useful and important as possible. I'm not going to cover all of the variables that you see here, but what I will focus in on is user text. The user text apply to that data source. So everything that FactoryTalk Alarm and Events can provide us through our API is available in this list. Things like the alarm message, for example, you can see I've got that configured already, as well as a lot of other variables that can be important when we're actually wanting to deliver a message to someone. If we take a look at a message template that's set up, I'm going to say no, I don't want to save those changes again. That's set up for an OPC message template. We actually have a different list of user text. These are all related to that data source. If you recall back to that gateway, we had things like the trigger test and the trigger value, and those are available here, as well as actually pulling back other OPC items. Maybe there is a string that relates to the SKU that you actually want to send someone a page about that you can embed directly in that message and make it a variable so that as those messages are generated, they're as useful and contain that real-time information that you're looking for. And again, you can create as many message templates as you see fit, but the idea is to create as few as you need and apply those to the alarms. So every alarm that we have in our system is comprised of really three things. I'll focus in on OPC first, just so that you can see that configuration, and then we'll take a look at FactoryTalk Alarm and Events. So as we mentioned, an escalation scheme is applied. There's simply a drop down that allows you to choose the escalation scheme that you're interested in. Equally, we've got a message tab that allows you to choose the message template that you're interested in, and you can simply select that. Those can also be defaulted if you have just say one escalation scheme and one message template that applies to those. And then it's the alarm itself. So when I go ahead and click on this browse button, we're going to reach out to the gateway where we actually configured the event, and we're going to show you a list of those events so that you can simply say, I'm interested in configuring the tank temp auto high alarm. When you press OK, we populate these fields with what the appropriate value is. Very similarly, even though OPC and FactoryTalk are different data sources, if we take a look at our alarm, and I'll go ahead and create a new alarm from a FactoryTalk perspective, again, we go and populate an escalation scheme. So you can see that the interface, despite it being different technologies, is still the same within the SeQent world. And even from a browsing perspective, when I go ahead and click on that browse button, we're populating and showing all of the alarms that exist in that FactoryTalk alarm and event environment. So again, thinking back to that gateway that had an empty tree view, we don't have to do any work in that application. It's really just setting up and forgetting about it. That application is pushing that information to First Page Alarm Manager. So once we're here, we can go ahead and say, I'm interested in configuring the Area 1. Actually, let's do the temperature high alarm here. So when I go ahead and click the temperature high alarm and I press OK, you'll see that we automatically populate those fields with the relevant information. And we actually go one step further. So not only do we include the alarm itself, but from a FactoryTalk perspective, we also populate the message. And the idea again is trying to make configuration that much quicker and easier for you. So if you don't have a good alarm scheme, but you have good messages, you can actually see that right through the browse interface. That was a recommendation from a customer. We take our customer feedback very seriously. If we think it's a good idea, we'll pour it right back into the software. So here I've created a one-to-one relationship, meaning that when the high temperature alarm turns on, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're going to page the appropriate people. But you may decide, I actually want to monitor everything that's under the line 1 or even area 1 folder structure. So you can actually select that folder, click OK, and you'll notice a couple things. We immediately switched to simple pattern matching, but we also introduced these wildcards and opened up the severity. So what this does for a user is it creates a one-to-many relationship where we can actually monitor multiple alarms without having to specify them within our software, which allows you to reduce configuration even further. So this can actually match potentially tens, hundreds, even thousands of alarms that you're ultimately have in your system with only having to create one or potentially a few records. So let's jump into a demonstration. Here you can see I've got a couple of web pages set up. One has a connection to some screen sharing software where I'm showing you an actual Android device that's sitting on my desk. Here we're looking at the Wi-Fi messenger application that SeQent produces to provide a Wi-Fi solution to receiving text messages within the four walls of a manufacturing facility. Also, I have this demonstration web page designed to allow us to control the OPC values in Kepware. We use this in partnership with Motorola as well, as we're a good partner of Motorola Solutions, and our ability to send a text message to either a Moto Turbo radio as text as mentioned, or as an audible. So we'll go ahead and we'll breach our alarm point at 80 degrees here, and we'll start our escalation scheme. Our first message is going to the smartphone. You can see that comes into Wi-Fi Messenger here, and you'll notice that real-time value of 82 degrees is represented there. I'll go ahead and increase the temperature here, and we should see that our subsequent messages show that increase in temperature. I can actually go ahead and show you that text message using the camera on the smartphone that's delivered to the radio with that 87 degrees there. And my last level of escalation is a text message, or I should say a text-to-speech message that should be going to my desk phone. There we go. Hope you could hear that in the background. And then when I go ahead and turn that alarm off, we can send optionally everyone a terminate message, letting them know that that alarm is no longer in an alarm condition. There's our terminate message there, and we get the phone call. The next demonstration that I'd like to do is from a FactoryTalk perspective. So I've got a little FactoryTalk demonstration environment here where I can go ahead and turn an alarm on. Our gateway picks up that alarm when it happens. We push that as a text message to the Wi-Fi messenger client. And again, you can see that it's showing you some of those variables that were resolved. We can go ahead and click on that, and we can actually acknowledge that message right from the smartphone and push that back into the FactoryTalk alarm and event environment. In a moment here, you'll notice that the alarm has been acknowledged via that check. And further, optionally, we can send a text message to the user who acknowledged it, letting them know that the system successfully received that acknowledgement. And you can see that on the smartphone here now. I'll go ahead and read that. And then finally, we can go ahead and turn that alarm off. And now the system's good, ready to send a text message out the next time an alarm condition occurs. So that briefly covers SeQent integration from FactoryTalk, alarm and events, and OPC, and a quick demonstration of escalation and acknowledgement from those systems. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.